Today is March 7th, 2021, and it has basically been an entire year since the COVID-19 pandemic began. COVID-19 was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization on March 11th, 2020, so that was just under a year ago, and the lockdowns also began around that time. The second week of March is when everything completely changed. That's when COVID-19 became a pandemic. That's when all the lockdowns started being imposed, all the social distancing measures. That's also when people started wearing masks. That's when our whole world completely changed, where life completely changed for basically all of us. So that was just under a year ago because that was in the second week of March when that all happened. From March 8th through March 14th, that's when things started to completely change. And the first week of March just ended. It is now the beginning of the second week of March. Today's Sunday. So it has basically been an entire year since this all began, since these lockdowns began, since this pandemic began, since a lot of people started getting this virus, since the number of cases and deaths due to this virus spiraled completely out of control. That all began in March, so around a year ago. So we've been having to deal with this for an entire year. It's been a pretty long ride. It has felt like a really long time. It has honestly felt like longer than a year to me. That might just be because the pre-pandemic world feels completely different to me now because of how long we've been in lockdown and because of how different things are now compared to before the pandemic began. It has also been just over 6 months since I began my daily upload schedule on this YouTube channel. Every single day for the past 6 months, I've been uploading a new YouTube video to this YouTube channel. So that was 6 months ago. It has been 6 months since that happened. It has also been a year since this pandemic began, which means that there's an equal amount of time between when the pandemic first began and when I started this daily upload schedule as there is between when I started this daily upload schedule and today. I started this daily upload schedule 6 months after the pandemic began, and now it has been, interestingly enough, 6 months since I began that daily upload schedule. So essentially, I started this daily upload schedule at the halfway mark between this pandemic beginning and now. And I kind of intentionally chose early September to start this daily upload schedule in September 2020 because that was the 6 month mark, and also because that was just a couple months before the 2020 election. But my point is, so much has happened in the past year, but this pandemic is still going on, and I want to talk about in this video what this pandemic might continue to look like in the upcoming months. In yesterday's video, I talked about this one website that has projections for the next few months in terms of a variety of statistics related to COVID-19. Yesterday's video talked about the worldwide numbers, but I didn't have enough time to talk about the United States specifically, so that's what I want to do in today's video. I want to talk about the United States specifically for the next few months, like the number of expected deaths due to COVID-19 in the next few months, and other statistics of that sort. So, when I last made a video like this website only had projections going up until May 1st, 2021, but now they've been able to update it, and now it goes up until July 1st, 2021. So, I would like to talk about this now. Since my daily upload schedule is ending next Saturday on March 13th, this will be the last video on this channel talking about future projections, but I think that by July 1st, 2021 anyway, by the time we reach July 1st, 2021, we'll have made great progress in terms of putting an end to this pandemic, at least in the United States. I'm a bit more concerned for worldwide numbers, but for the United States has been able to vaccinate a good amount of people every single day. And in the United States, we're now vaccinating more people per day than ever before. We're now administering more COVID-19 shots now than ever before. So that is great news. I think that the United States is on track to do a lot better in terms of dealing with COVID-19 in the upcoming months than in the past few months, especially because of the fact that we recently just dealt with the third wave of COVID-19 in the United States. We're now recovering from that, but it was really bad. At one point, we had over 300,000 cases in a day and over 4,000 deaths per day due to COVID-19. It was really bad. It was at its absolute worst in late December, early January, but ever since early to mid-January, we've been on the recovering end of that wave. The main concern I think is in the upcoming months, some scientists are worried that mutations, especially the B117 mutation, that's the one that scientists are most worried about, that could potentially cause a fourth wave in the United States, but even then, I don't think that it's going to be as big of a problem as the third wave was because of the fact that the vaccines have proven to at least mostly be able to target the B117 mutation. Let's actually get into it now. So like I said, this projection model now has projections up until July 1st, 2021. So that's just under 4 months from today. And that also happens to be when half of 2021 will be over. That's when the first 6 months of 2021 will be done with, January through June. So I think now is a great time to make this video because we can talk about what things might look like after half of 2021 is over. So this projection model projects that by July 1st, 2021, in total, the United States will have had 576,000 deaths due to COVID-19, which is actually great news considering the fact that we have already had over 500,000 deaths. Currently, we're at somewhere between 520 and 540,000 deaths in the United States due to COVID-19. According to this projection model, by the way, the URL for this projection model is covid19.healthdata.org. According to this projection model, we're currently at around 520,000 deaths, but according to worldometers.com, we're at around 538,000 deaths. I'm not actually sure why there's a slight discrepancy between what worldometers.com says and what this projection model says, but we're around 530,000 deaths more or less. But this projection model predicts that by July 1st, 2021, we'll only have 576,000 deaths, which means that we only have around 50,000 more deaths compared to what we're currently at, which I think is pretty great news, especially considering how many deaths we've had in the past few months due to COVID-19. Just like in yesterday's video where I talked about there being 3 different scenarios that this projection model includes, the United States projection model also includes 3 different projections. There's a best case scenario, there's a worst case scenario, and there's an average scenario. So I'm going to talk about that now. The 576,000 death prediction, that's the average scenario, but the best case scenario is slightly better than that. Best case scenario is by July 1st, 2021, we're at 567,000 deaths, but the worst case scenario is that we're at 641,000 deaths by July 1st, 2021, which would mean a little over 100,000 deaths between now and July 1st, 2021. But even in the worst case scenario, that's still much better in terms of COVID-19 deaths compared to what we've been dealing with in the past few months. I mean, we're already at 530,000 deaths, but we only hit 400,000 deaths in early January, and we hit 300,000 deaths in early December, so it only took 1 month to get from 300,000 to 400,000 deaths, and we hit 500,000 deaths in February, so it only took another month to get from 400,000 to 500,000. So if we only have, even if we have 100,000 deaths in the next 4 months, that's still a lot better than what we've been having in the past few months, the number of deaths we've been having the past few months. Now we're at daily deaths. We just talked about the total number of deaths by July 1st, 2021. This projection model also predicts the daily number of deaths by July 1st, 2021 due to COVID-19. And I just talked about how this projection model predicts that the number of deaths is not expected to increase by that much in the upcoming months, even in the worst case scenario. So likewise, that also means that the daily death count is expected to be relatively low in the upcoming months, especially compared to the daily death count in the previous few months. So, at its worst, the daily death count in late December and early January was on average over 3,000, and currently the daily death count's a lot less than that. It's only around half of that, at around 1,500 deaths per day due to COVID-19. That's still quite a bit, but that's just because we're still on the recovering end of the third wave, and there generally is a lag between between a decrease in the daily case count and a decrease in the daily death count. The daily case count has been pretty low for weeks, but because there's a lag between the case count and death count, it took many weeks for the daily death count to decrease by a lot, and we're still in the middle of that decrease in the daily death count. The reason why there's that lag is because generally it takes several weeks for someone to die from COVID-19 after they first get the virus. So we're currently at a bit less than 1,500 deaths per day, around 1,500 deaths per day, but the daily death count in even the worst case scenario is expected to decrease in the upcoming months, which I think is definitely good news. In the worst case scenario, the daily death count by July 1st, 2021 is around 836 per day, but the best case scenario and even the average scenario, they're both really good. The current projection, which is just the average projection, is only 72 deaths per day, which I feel like is a bit too good to be true. To me, 72 deaths per day by July 1st, 2021 seems a bit too good to be true, but the best case scenario is only 35 deaths per day by July 1st, both 35 and 72 to me, I don't know, they just seem a bit too good to be true, but even the worst case scenario is only 800 deaths per day. Hopefully, we're closer to the average and best case scenarios than the worst case scenarios. It would be nice if we only had a couple hundred deaths per day due to COVID 19 by July 2021. It's definitely possible considering the rate at which we're vaccinating our citizens, but that would be nice, having only a couple hundred deaths, or even less than that, like less than 100 deaths per day by July 2021. That would be really nice. I'm pretty optimistic for the United States, at least in terms of COVID 19 deaths in the upcoming months. I think that we're definitely already making a lot of progress and will continue to make progress. I think we can really reduce the daily death count by a huge amount in the upcoming months, considering how quickly we've been able to vaccinate our citizens. Now let's talk about hospital usage. Currently, we need around 81,000 beds in total, and we need around 18,000 or close to 19,000 invasive ventilators are currently needed, and around 9,700 ICU beds are needed. But by July 1st, 2021, it's projected that we're only going to need around 4,200 beds in total, around 981 invasive ventilators in total, and around 489 ICU beds will be needed in total by July 1st, 2021. So all three of those things are expected to decrease by quite a lot in the upcoming months, which once again is great news. That has to do with the fact that the daily death count is expected to decrease by a lot in the upcoming months. Now let's talk about daily infections and daily testing. So I talked about this in yesterday's video, but it appears that this projection model for the daily number of cases, it takes into account the fact that many COVID 19 cases never get tested for. Many people who get COVID 19, especially if they're asymptomatic, they never actually go out and get tested for it, and as a result, that's a COVID 19 case that never actually gets recorded, which means that the number of COVID 19 cases that's officially reported is less than the actual number of COVID 19 cases because not everybody who actually gets COVID 19 goes out and gets tested for it, which is why the number of COVID 19 cases is generally underreported. But currently, according to this projection model, we're at around 115,000 COVID 19 cases per day. But by July 1st, 2021, in the worst case scenario, we're going to have 84,000 cases per day. But the best case scenario and the average scenario are much, much better than that. It's interesting how there's such a big difference between the worst case scenario and the average and best case scenario. So I'm really hoping we're a lot closer to the average or best case scenario. In the average scenario, we're at 5,778 cases per day, and in the best case scenario, we're at only 2,304 cases of COVID 19 per day. I don't know why there's such a big difference between the worst case scenario and the other two. That might have to do with the fact that it makes a big difference whether or not people continue to wear masks even after a lot of people get vaccinated, because the vaccines aren't 100% effective. It's important that people still wear masks even now, even when a lot of people have already gotten the vaccine, since the vaccines aren't 100% effective. But regardless, it's still good news that we're getting a lot of people vaccinated. Now let's talk about mask usage. So currently, according to this projection model, mask usage is at around 77%, but by July 1st, 2021, that number is expected to go down by quite a lot. By July 1st, 2021, it's expected to only be at 46%. So I guess that has to do with the fact that since a lot of people are getting vaccinated, masks won't be as necessary. I mean, it's still important that people wear them, like I said, but I don't think as many people are going to wear them in the upcoming months, and that's why it's projected to go down to only 46%. It's worth pointing out that this model projects that by early May 2021, mask usage will still be at around 72%, which means that the mask usage is expected to decrease a lot more between May and July than between now, which is March, and May. So I guess once the spring season ends, then mask usage will decrease by a lot because that's when a lot of people will be vaccinated. But even currently, not that many people have been vaccinated, and that's why a lot of people will still continue to wear masks at least for a few more months. Finally, we're at social distancing. So I talked about this in yesterday's video. This projection model is able to project how much mobility there will be in the upcoming months. So currently, this model says that we're at 25% less mobility than normal. Normal being if there wasn't a pandemic, but by July 1st, 2021, in the best case scenario, which means in terms of COVID 19 cases and deaths, we're still at 23% less mobility than normal, but worst case scenario, worst in terms of COVID 19 cases and deaths, we're only at 10% less mobility than normal. The average projection's also at 23% less mobility than normal, same as the best case scenario, which I find pretty interesting.